Hey guys, we've got the heavy hitter, the Babe Ruth of TennisCon. He's here to help you hit that serve, fence crushing aces. This is Jorge
Right.
Capestany, master tennis professional of everything, in Hall of Fame for coaching. Everything you can think of about coaching, that's great. You just think Jorge. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us again for TennisCon 6.
No problem. Thanks for the invite. And we're back for TennisCon 6. Is that right? Number 6?
Yeah, number 6.
Wow, that's
I'm
crazy. Good
excited.
work.
Yeah, well, every year, and this year's no different. I do presentations, and even I did a thing this weekend with people, and I just interviewed Will from Fuzzy O Balls, and I must have given like 5 or 6 tips I got from his presentation that was just as we were coaching. So, these really helped me as well become a better coach and understand the game better. And certainly, I've learned so much from you, and I know that they're going to learn a lot from you today. So, tell everybody what your topic is today and what they can expect to get out of it.
Sure. So it's a little different for me because obviously in the past, mostly what I've done is either, drill based or workout based or, mental toughness stuff. But this one, I would say it's more of the technical realm. And specifically, we're going to take a deep dive into the serve, arguably the most important thing. And I'm going to have a couple of PowerPoint slides I want to cover with you, but then a lot of it I want to go get on the court and show you how I do these 9 checkpoints. We're going to make sure. One of the things that when I was just a little baby pro and I was just teaching, I remember at the end of many private lessons, Peter, we'd finish maybe 10 minutes of serving, and I lap on the baseline, my player serving that way, and I would just watch them, and honestly, I wasn't too sure what I was even looking for. Unless it was a super obvious flaw that looked horrible, I could pick that out. But over the years, I've educated myself, and I think I'd like to teach all technique in the range of technical checkpoints. And I don't want to invent the checkpoints. I go to people like Mark Kovacs and the pros and stuff like that. And so I'm pretty sure that these are the correct checkpoints, but a lot of people don't know. So what we're going to do here today is go through the 9 checkpoints on the serve, and then I'm going to show you various videos on how that looks so you truly understand it. And then we're going to have a section where we go on the court, and I'm going to give you a specific fix for each of those 9 checkpoints. Because I've been teaching this class at my club called the serve class, and part of it is you get a video of you and the 9 checkpoints. And for each of the ones they are, like checkpoint number 4 is the trophy position. Boom. If it's wrong, it's almost always the same 1 or 2 things. So that's what I want to cover.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, should we get started? Would you like me to pop your PowerPoint in there?
Yeah, pop that video up there, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. All right. So it should be coming your way here in a second. And I'm looking really forward to technique and correction.
All right, guys, let's get going on the PowerPoint here real quick. So that's the title. Here's what we're going to cover, basically. I'm going to spend a little time about talking of this phrase that I came up with, range of acceptability. Because when it comes to teaching technique and learning technique, there's a lot of people that kind of go down a rabbit hole and they do it wrong. Then section 2 here, we're going to have a big section on just what are the 9 checkpoints. I'll show you Roger Federer in each of those. I'll show you some video. So you're going to really understand what those 9 checkpoints are. And then the last thing is we're going to go on the courts with myself and my wife, and you'll see a video of me showing you how you could correct any of the checkpoint errors along the way. So checkpoint 2, weight transfer, if you screw it up, boom, I'll show you the top 2 fixes for how to do that. So with that said, let's keep plowing through. So we're going to start with range of acceptability, and at the bottom there, this is super important. Substance versus style. I want you to keep that in mind because so much of technique is substance, which means the stuff that really matters that you have to kind of get right. And some other stuff is style. Like today I was watching, Labor Cup, and I see Francis Tiafoe with a very unusual takeaway with his wrist on the serve, right? So is that substance that we got to fix, or is that style the way he just does it? So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So with that said, I want to show you a perfect example. So on the screen here, we got Roger Federer, and we're going to look at his takeaway on the racket for the serve. Okay, you see the little red line there? Just keep watching the screen. It goes back. Now his racket's a little further back along that same red line, further back, even further back, and now he ends up in the trophy. Okay, so a lot of people, coaches even, would say that's correct. If you don't do it that way, you're wrong. But here's the problem. We got this guy here, Andy Roddick, who used to serve almost 150 miles an hour. He doesn't go. I call this that Federer the lower hemisphere. It's like if the waist is the equator, he's below the waist, right? But look at this line here for Roddick. He's like, hey, wait a minute, right? You're going up. See how he's going through, and he gets to there. But look at the magic on those last slide. They both get to that trophy position, and a lot of what they're doing is correct. They're coiled up, they're loaded, their arm is up, the racket tip is up. So does it really matter if you did the Roger Federer Southern Hemisphere takeaway or the abbreviated or Northern Hemisphere? I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, both of those are acceptable. I wouldn't mess with a player doing one or the other. But I know there's lots of coaches that would say that's not correct, that it needs to be changed. And I know there's lots of players just tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. So let me show you some more examples.
Can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
It's so funny. I did a camp this weekend with adults, and number one, I gave a woman a talk about the range of acceptability because she was speaking out about a lot of things. I'm like, yeah, but your strokes are actually pretty good. There's this really great coach called Jorge Capestany. He talked about the range of acceptability, and I think you're in there. And then we did the serve, and I talked about Roger Federer, how he sweeps down and then up, and then how Roddick just goes right up. I use the same exact examples, and I talk about, but the most important thing is, and where you're at, I like to call that the secret power source, and that's the key. Yeah. You can't miss that step. All right, very cool.
I like it. Good. I'm glad that we're on there. All right, so let's keep going here. I'm just going to give you some more examples because this is rampant in the tennis world. So here I'm going to put 4 pictures up. This is the example we're doing here is the preparation or the unit turn. Okay, so you see Roger, and look at his racket head. Okay, up towards the sky, a little bit to his right. Here's Rafa. Okay, Rafa has it tipping the other way, not away from him, but kind of behind his head. Here's Kyrgios with a racket tip facing the opponent, and here's Team kind of facing the opponent up. So clearly, all 4 of these are really good forehands. And my takeaway is be careful being too prescriptive. Okay, I'm going to show you another one because this one came to my attention. I had a student ask, should I hit a bent arm forehand or a straight arm? Well, here's Roger and Rafa. They both use, basically, look at those little circles there. Those are straight arm forehands, 2 of the best forehands ever. So issue solved, right? That you should hit with a straight arm forehand. Wait a minute. What about this guy? Look at his elbow. And what about this guy? Look at his elbow. So, bummer. Maybe it's not so clear. So, again, range of acceptability. To me, that's all style and not substance. I'm not going to go to Andy Murray and say, hey, we got to work on straightening out your forehand just because Rafa and Fed do it that way. Last example is these follow-throughs, okay? Look at the hand where Federer is, kind of by his shoulder. Look at Rafa's elbow way up above his head. Look at how much torque Jack Sock has put on the racket. He's flipped his arm and his wrist way over. And then look at Gulbis, where it's like someone scored a touchdown. He's like doing the touchdown sign. So, again, it all matters, but it's not one way. So here's my bottom line as we leave this area of accessibility. How you hit the ball matters for sure. I don't want people saying, oh, I heard that Jorge guy talking. He says technique doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying. But where you hit the ball matters more. And here's number 3 is my warning to everyone watching. Students, rec players, you have to be aware or beware of technique addiction. And what I mean by that is I know that lots of people at my club, and I'm still working at a club, so I see a lot of humans. A whole bunch of them, probably 50% of the people taking private lessons have this technique addiction where they think, no, what I need to do to get better is I got to tweak this or I got to tweak that. And they're never ending taking private after private after private. So it never gets better. It only gets marginally better. Next thing you know, they have a bad outing. Oh, must go tweak it again. So 10 years in, They're just working on tweaking that, whatever it is, for serve or whatnot. So that's kind of what I mean there, Peter, by the range of acceptability. So now this next stage here is the 9 technical checkpoints. So here's what we're going to do in this next section, if you will. We're going to, once we get into the court, first I'm going to show you something about Roger so we get it. But I'm going to talk, you'll see a video about grips and stances. Then I'm going to show you the 9 checkpoints where I'm actually doing a video analysis, a side view of my wife, Marty, who's also a coach. We'll do another check of the 9 checkpoints from the rear view with Coach Bob. And then I even have this really cool drone view because very few people can see a drone view of a serve, so you see the rotation real good. But before we do that, let's get into this guy here who was making me cry the other day because he retired.
Well, I cried too. 20 times.
So what are these 9 checkpoints? I'm going to go through here with image so I can just take my time and show you. So number 1 is the rituals, and what we're looking for here is the player should have the weight on the front foot. You can see Roger's weight is mostly on that foot, and his back one's actually off the ground, or it's clearly not as weighted. The ball should be, if you're bouncing the ball, which it should be bouncing it back here. That's what we're looking here. The number 1 screw up here is that people start without their weight on the front foot. They start with their weight evenly distributed, and then their rock doesn't go. So that's checkpoint 1 is the rituals. 2 is the weight transfer. So if you look back here, you see how the weight's here and not much there. On the very next screen, now this toe is up, and this racket, or you can see his weight is back on this back foot, but the racket is still pointing forward. It's not back right there. And that's a super easy one to mess up. The third thing is the ball release. This is another checkpoint we can do. So the ball release should be roughly eye high. You don't want to release it down by your chest or way too high above your head. 45 degrees, so Roger's arm would be pointing to the right net post if you're thinking about a net in front of you. His palm is down, the racket's trailing. All right, so those are the things that we can look. And then with video analysis, we can stop and actually judge real easily if this is happening or not. Number 4, my terminology, the loading or the trophy. Okay, so here we want to see that the legs are evenly loaded. You can see that his muscles and his legs are working. You start to see a little curve in the body. Okay, see like his hips or the legs start to jet out. And the key here is the racket tip is still up. Obviously the ball is gone, it's up in the air, and the racket tip is still up. Number 1 mess up here is the racket tip is back in the weight or tray position. By the way, when I analyze people at my club, if I did 100 videos, 60 to 70 people will have this one wrong. And it's always the weight or tray. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we go to the court. So that's my number 4. Number 5 is the launch, where you're launching the racket forward. So here's a couple things that we see. From the side view, obviously I'm a side view here, I should see his strings, which means he's leading up with the edge of the racket, like a tomahawk, like he's going to chop it into a tree. Obviously he'll rotate, pronate, and externally and rotate. But the other thing is the best servers, they kind of lead with the elbow. It's not a push, it's a pull. He's pulling this forward. So his elbow's kind of the furthest point forward here. And obviously he's generated off the ground. You can see he's airborne here. So these are the main things we look at here. If this flat, like if I was seeing the edge of the racket instead of the strings, that means he's leading with the face going forward. And I want him to lead with the edge going forward. Number 6 is the point of contact. So there's a lot of things to look at here. Elbow should be tucked in. Obviously, the arm should be very straight and very high, not too far in front. Roger has a teeny bit of a pike. You see how he pikes a little bit, but we're going to forgive him because he's a legend. So that's number 6. Number 7 on the technical checkpoint is probably the most misunderstood. So this is huge, and probably 8 out of 10 of my people get this wrong. So what happens? Let's go back one screen. He's here. Okay, you see how watch this part of his arm, and now he's here. So right here, his palm or his fingers are facing the opponent, and the very next screen, they're clearly facing us, the camera on the right. So what's happened is 2 things here. I always, like if Roger So yeah, his thumb is on the bottom. Like his thumb is down. He could like if he was booing somebody and putting his thumb down, that's what it would look like. If he opened his palm right now, we could read his palm. We wouldn't see the back of his hand. So here's the deal. What really happens between this frame and this frame, I learned. I used to say, well, when I first was taught, I was taught snap your wrist. Like literally that joint right there was supposed to break. You can see that joint didn't break. So what's happened is two things. His forearm, that part, has pronated. But more importantly, this upper part is two parts to it. This shoulder has internally rotated. Okay, so from here to here, two things happen. And this is the end result. So together, when this internally rotates and that forearm pronates, those together are called long axis rotation because it's the whole arm. Okay, and the joint itself is not flexing, not like you're waving bye-bye. All right, so that's a huge one. And then the number 8 on the checkpoint for me is a landing. We hope that the landing will be inside the court. Half the time it's not. And then if you did this well, your rear leg will kick backwards because the more your chest aims towards the ground, the more that balances you. So those are kind of the checkpoints. Now, that's a little bit helpful, but I think when I go through the next part here, and just get to here, is I want to take you on the court now. And this whole next section is going to be a video. We'll put this is all a bunch of little mini videos. We'll put them together. But remember the first of the checkpoints was rituals. I'm going to show you how to fix it, how to fix a weight transfer, how to fix the ball. Assuming it's wrong. If it's not wrong, then obviously no worries. How to fix the trophy position, how to fix the rocket drop, and all these kinds of things. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go on the court, and then we can reconvene after. But before I do that, just wondered if you had any questions so far. Let me stop sharing my screen.
First of all, this is a brilliant presentation as always. Another Babe Ruth Grand Slam home run. And I guess the most thing I'm interested in, are you going to go to the court and show us how to fix that internal rotation part?
Yeah, I'm going to teach you all that and the ways to fix that. And these are things that have worked for me. So let's just use that loading one, the trophy position one, because that's a really commonly messed up one. Usually the people, instead of having that racket up, like a salute and the racket tip up, it's already back like this. Well, that's called the weight or tray in our industry, and there's lots of ways to fix that. I'm going to show you how I fix it. So I'm going to assume that the viewer has this fall, and I'm going to show you all the stuff. Now, I've been doing this for a while, so I've tried to fix a weight or tray probably 100 different ways. I'm going to show you 2 or 3 that actually work for most people.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So let's go on the court, and then you'll see all these things that we'll be doing. My wife, Marty, and then we'll come on back and wrap this baby up.
Awesome.
Okay, guys, we're going to talk about grips and stances. So Marty here's with me. So Marty, when it comes to the grips, let's just cover grips first because they're super important. So the grip, the recommended grip is the continental grip, okay? So I'll put up a little image on the screen here. You can see where the bevels are. There's 8 sides, and you're basically going to have the index knuckle and the pad of your hand on bevel 2. That's the true continental grip. Another quick way to do it is just to use a pencil. I really like this one. You put a pencil and you put it not on bevel 1 but on bevel 2, and you put it between your finger and your middle finger. Okay, so if I do this, Marty, you can see how that's a 45-degree angle. That pencil's giving me visual feedback. It's on that angle, which is 45 degree, which is bevel 2. So that's a great little way to check it. Okay. Now the thing about the grip is it's fairly non-negotiable. When it comes to other shots, forehand, you can see Eastern forehand, semi-Western, full Western, same thing on backhands, lots of variety. But when it comes to the serve, it's a lot more, strict, if you will. So initially a continental grip, and I'm a believer that if need be, coach's discretion, if you need to have them serve with a Eastern forehand grip to begin so they have some success, I'd be cool about that. So that's my thoughts on the grip and what I think you should say. Now, stances. This is a very, coaches get real opinionated about this. What I was taught back when I started, my coach was very prescriptive. He said to me, Jorge, the front foot should be 45-degree angle here. All right, so you can see my front foot is 45 degree. He wanted my back foot to be parallel with the baseline, okay? And then he wanted my foot, whether this way or this way, he instructed me to line up my 2 toes, and those 2 toes should be aiming towards my target, okay? So that's how some coaches do it. It's not technically wrong, but I don't like that way because it's too prescriptive. And I think a lot of people that might be super comfortable here and kind of close enough, I tell them this much and they feel like they're really bogged down. It's really, really difficult. So what do I say? Obviously there's a range of acceptability. I would not want my person serving like this, and I don't want them too turned. So my method, which I think you could test, is I just pretend that this is a rifle. I'm doing some target shooting, or I can tell my student that they're doing archery. And I just say line up, aim, take this, make it like a bow and arrow, and just pretend that you're drawing back and you're aiming to your target. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to line up kind of similar. You see me, I'm not quite 45, and this is more in front. Or a rifle, whatever you want. This is a really good way because 9 out of 10 times they're going to line up in something that's acceptable. It's in the range of acceptability. Rarely do I see people do, if I say pull a thing, they don't put toe to the line and do this, just not comfortable. Okay, so almost always it gets sideways. So that is a big topic. Grips, a little more prescriptive. Stances, a little bit more leeway. But that's the best way that I explain it, and I think that's how you should explain it to your students. Okay, everybody, here we have a really cool view of a drone view totally from the top on a server. So this is Coach Nate, who works with me, another 5.0 plus player, a good server as well. So let's see what we can see. We're going to look for some checkpoints. It'll be a little harder to see some of them and easier to see others. You can see the back foot here, you can tell it's unweighted. He's covering his front foot, but that means the weight's on the front foot, as you can tell. And the racket's in front of the line. All right, so that's probably good for 1. Here comes the weight transfer. Let's watch to see what happens here, and this foot should start to flatten out. And there it was. Okay, you can see the weight's back on it now. And here you can see the weight's back on it, but notice, good thing here, rackets in front. That's another one of those really important checkpoints. Now we're going to see the toss. All right, so you can tell, I can see it's probably about eye high, but I also like that it's 45-degree angles aiming this way towards that net post, which is always like another checkpoint. So now from here we go to number 4, which is that trophy position. All right, so you can see he's got a good trophy position. His racket is up towards the drone. His arms are up, no weight or tray here. One thing you can see, I'm going to take a little slight detour here, and I want you to kind of just pay attention to the middle of his body, his torso. You can see some good kinetic link going on here. So we'll take a little detour in this video. Just watch this. There's twisting and then there's untwisting. You can see that hip goes forward. So just do this, 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 this. You can see right in that position how that starts to stick out. Right? So now that's the toss, that's the trophy position right there. And now we're going to do the launch. Okay, we can see that he's leading with the elbow. That's the first thing going forward. That's good. You can see the ball is kind of a cool angle. He's coming up to it. You can see he's coming up on edge. All right, totally on the edge here. And now he's going to hit. You can see his point of contact right back there. The ball, by the way, is a little hard to see, but I'll make a line. The ball is actually right there, right where that ends. And you can see he hits it. All right, let's get rid of that. Now let's look at some arm action, the whole arm, and now you can see he's pointing down. His strings are now pointed kind of that way. So that's kind of a good thing. Let's get rid here. You can see he landed in the court, and you can see that back leg is kicking out. So this is a really good thing. I'm going to be doing some more with the aerial stuff to show you a little bit about the rotation. I think you can see rotation really good from here. But there's just another view for you. I want you to kind of have it in your head what all these proper checkpoints look like, and then we're going to obviously teach you how to accomplish them. Alright, so there you go. Drone view, totally from the top on a good server. Coach Bob, one of the guys I work with, really good player, 5.0 plus. And what we're going to do here is look at the 9 checkpoints from a rear view. Okay, slightly different view. So we're going to go. We're looking for number 1. So number 1 is the rituals. You can see even from this view, weights on the front foot. He's doing his rituals, and the back foot is unweighted, so he passes. Now, checkpoint 2. Getting close. The weight is going to transfer. There's a weight transfer. You see how that looks down here. Let me make some. Let's draw your attention all down here. The weight is on the back foot. You can see that front foot doesn't have much weight on it. And the good news is his racket is still in front. You can see by the shadow there that he didn't bring it back too early. Okay, so now the release. We're going to see, we want that toss to be released about eye high. And when I say that 45-degree angle, you can see that arm is pretty much at a 45-degree angle to that post. Palm down, so everything looks good here on his checkpoints. Let's go to number 4, which is that trophy position, the low position. A lot of good things here. The best thing I see, now we can't really see down the line how much his hip is pushing forward, but we can see a perfect, nice spacing here with his elbow. Racket is clearly up towards the sky, no doubt about that. So that's another pass for Bob. Everything looks good there. Now is going to be the launch. So you can see, let's go real quick. Watch this elbow, bro. Just keep watching that elbow there. You can see how it's kind of leading the way. All right. So I'm bringing your attention right to about here. That elbow is the first thing that's coming. All right. Now in this frame right here, you can see even better from the back view that his racket is lined up on the edge. So if we were filming from the side, we'd be able to see strings. Because we're behind him, we cannot. So right now it looks like he's taking a hatchet. He's going to chop that ball with the edge of the racket. So let's just see what really happens. You can see a great thing here from the back view. We'll just go frame by frame. You see how he's up and the racket's a little bit more open. In the next frame, boom. Now it's completely flat. This is a perfect view of what that looks like from behind. The strings are squared up now. So we can get rid of that. And then now let's see what happens with his arm rotation. Okay, so let's go back to this frame. You can see the strings, and now watch, his strings are going to, the hitting side, which is pointing towards that back fence, is going to start pointing this way in that direction. So let's see, we can see it right there. Boom. All right, let's go back a frame. Right there you can see it. Bam. There it was. So you can see right here, these strings are now the same side that was hitting the ball is now that way. Go a little further, and now it's even this way. Alright, so you can see he's actually done the correct arm motion there, and his racket has gone from, I'm going to back it up, the hitting side is currently facing that way, a little forward, now it's facing obviously that way, a little bit more, and now it's facing right here this way. So that's really what happens. That's what the proper arm motion will look like if you really slow it down. Okay, so then the landing, let's see, there's a landing right here. You can see it, perfect landing. Oh, get the wrong thing here. That landing, let's clear and put a circle here, right there. And already you can see that he's done a good job, and this back leg is counterbalancing. So again, I'm showing you some pros. So they're not perfect, but they got really good technique, and I want you to see what it looks like. And this is a good view because the back view sometimes tells you some things, and it's easier to see some of the checkpoints in the back view over the side view. Okay, everybody, let's take a side view now of Marty, actually player, and this will be live video. So I'm going to scrub through this, and there's Marty doing her ritual. This is number 1, checkpoint number 1, rituals, and let's remember what we're looking for. She's bouncing the ball. Yeah. Weight is on that front foot, and the back foot's unweighted. Right? So right here, I would say we pass Marty. This is all good. Right? Now, checkpoint number 2, the weight goes back. So watch Marty's feet down here. The weight goes back. You see how it's pretty much back right now. This leg here has most of the weight on it. I'll go a little further. And also important, the racket, her hitting racket, is still in front. All right, so those are the 2 things I would look for. And again, I think we pass Marty here. She looks good to me. All right, let's go to checkpoint number 3, which is the release. Okay, so here's a release, and should it be eye high? So I think right here, if we zoom in, obviously, that's pretty close to eye high. Marty's a little higher than Roger was here. Palm's starting to I guess the palm is still down there. So I say on the release is pretty good. 45-degree angle also. That arm is probably pointed towards the net post over here. So far so good. And now we're going to get into what we call that trophy position. Okay, so here you can see a bunch of things. I'm gonna just make a line here for visual reference. This is where I always say I want to start to see the body start to bow, right? Some kind of bow here, you know, and I think I'm seeing it. But the number one thing I like is this: the racket head is still up, right? So everything here to me in this load position looks pretty good. All right, so now we're going to go to the launch. All right, so the launch we're going to see is Marty leading with the elbow. I think that she is. The big things we're looking here is there's the elbow leading, okay? And the other thing we're seeing is we wanted to be able to see at this point all her strings, which we are. So she's cooking with gas. So far, technically, not too many things wrong with this serve. All right, so then the point of contact is as high as you go. All right, so what I'm going to look at here is the arm straight. In my opinion, this is pretty darn straight. Eyes are up. Not too much bending here, and not much of a pike. So again, another pass here for Marty. And then we're going to start looking here. So now for this, we're looking right here. Just let me change that for you. Get a circle here. That's what we're looking for, right? So it might be helpful if I double click on this and zoom in. We are seeing fingertips here. All right, and Marty's racket is starting. You can see this, the correct side of the strings, not majorly, but somewhat. All right, so I think this is pretty good. The next one is the landing. All right, so clearly Marty is landing inside the court, so that's another pass. And then the last one is the counterbalance, and you can see this was a warm-up serve for her, but it is in this position. Okay, that thing is kicked back compared to the other leg. So there's just another view of all 9 checkpoints, that time in a little motion. And you'll see that Marty's technically pretty good. So Marty doesn't have to spend a lot of time trying to squeeze out a little more perfection out of her technical side. I think she's fine, and I know for a fact, because she's my wife, that she's already past that and on to the bigger stuff, the serving smart and all the tactical things. All right, so there's a good one with Marty on the checkpoints.
Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to fix if you have your grips and your stances are wrong, if you didn't really pass that checkpoint. Now this is kind of a checkpoint. It's actually before the 9 checkpoints start, but it's the first thing we do. We got to see if your grip is correct and if you're lined up properly with your stance. So the correct thing, as you know, is I always tell people to kind of turn sideways, and I'm not a big believer in this 45-degree angle and then this foot parallel to the ground and then the toes go through. I think that's too prescriptive. When you do that, people will line up and a good percentage of them will be like, oh, geez, I did it how he wanted exactly, but this isn't comfortable for me. Maybe this is a little more comfortable for that person. And the next guy might be a little more like that. So here's my recommendation. You take, like you do, a bow and arrow, okay? Or you could pretend you're shooting, you know, at targets with a rifle. That sideways amount is usually almost perfect for what people need. Okay, so that's what I would suggest with the stances. Now, the other thing about the stance, and this will really affect the second one, is you have to have your stance at least shoulder width apart. So that's how one thing you can check. If your feet are too close, okay, it's going to mess you up on the weight transfer, which is that next checkpoint. All right, so that's what I have to say about stances. Now, as far as grips, this one I'm going to be pretty insistent on. It has to be a continental grip. At least eventually, maybe not the first day if I want you to just succeed and get the ball in, but all good players eventually serve with a continental grip. Now, the best way to describe the continental grip is you take the pad of the hand and the knuckle, and then you take your racket. As you know, it looks like a stop sign. There's 8 signs to it. This would be the top, this would be bevel 2. If I put those 2 things on bevel 2, that's one way to do it, okay? So it would look like that. The other way that I can get people into this continental grip pretty effectively is I just tell them, grab this as if it were a hammer, okay? And then take something, pretend you got a nail here, and how would I line up my grip on this hammer if I was about to do a nail? And almost always when people kind of do it, they get themselves already into the continental grip, okay? And there's a way to check if you have the continental grip. It's a simple trick. You use a pencil. What's going to happen is I'm going to put this pencil not at the top, not at the side, but on this 45-degree angle, and I'm going to put it between my index finger and the grip. So if you can zoom in on that a little bit, you can see that this pencil is on the 45, which means it's on this bevel, which is correct for the continental grip. All right, so those are a couple easy ways that you can check the stances and the grips. There's not a lot to do here other than just kind of understand what they are and then just practice doing them. So let's go ahead and go on to that next video. All right, guys, we're here to serve checkpoint number 1, which is the rituals. We're going to see if you're doing rituals. All right, so if you've been diagnosed or told by a coach that, hey, your rituals, stage 1 of the checkpoints, that's off, usually it's because of a couple of things. The first thing it could be is that you don't do rituals at all. Okay, so you come up and you just, you might grab a ball, come up to serve, and literally just go. Okay, there's not a bouncing whatsoever. So here's what I want you to do. The second thing that it could be in this checkpoint number 1 of rituals is that you're doing a ritual, but you're bouncing the ball behind the baseline. Okay, back here in the green, and your feet are not properly lined up. Okay, the other thing that could be going wrong is that instead of having your weight on the front foot, you have them evenly distributed, or maybe even the weight on the back foot. Okay, so any one of those 3 things is the top 3 things that could go wrong on the ritual. So the way to fix that is real simple. You're going to put your weight on the front foot, and you're going to take your back foot and look at it. You're going to put it on the toe. By putting it just on your toe, you're not going to be able to weight that foot very much. So it ensures that all the weight is on the front foot. Then from this position, I just want you to bounce the ball. And by the way, bouncing the ball or bouncing the ball and hitting it, that's all preference. I personally do this thing where I bounce it and hit it, but if you do this, that's not worth worrying about. That's more substance or style than substance. So this is how you fix this if you get it wrong. Weight in the front foot, toe right here, and bounce it in the blue, okay? And then maybe come back and do it again. Practice your rituals. I'm just doing this rituals right now. Come back over here, practice it again. But the big one here is don't be bouncing the ball back in here, and don't be eliminating or just ignoring rituals to begin with. That's how you fix the common things at stage 1 rituals. Okay, now we're on checkpoint number 2, which is after the rituals comes the weight transfer. Okay, so if you're doing this part wrong, it's almost always for these reasons. So watch what happens. If my feet are too much together, okay, they're too much together, it's really difficult to rock my weight back and forth. So it's super important here that if you're not changing your or transferring your weight from the front to the back like it should look, it could be one of these things here. So make sure you're at least shoulder width apart. Okay, and by the way, what I would do then is just put most of the way here, most of the way here. Just feel you're going back and forth. You don't pick up the foot necessarily, but you put 90% of your weight here, just my toe, 90% just my toe, and you get that feeling of rocking back and forth. Okay. The second thing that usually happens here, this is really common, is maybe the person does rock, and you can see them do the weight transfer, but another big thing that you're supposed to do here is you do your rituals, right? Now here comes the weight transfer. Weight goes back, racket stays in front. So it's aiming that way. It's not, I'll show you how you do it wrong. This would be wrong. Weight back together, okay? So the weight transferred back and the racket already went back. So just think of this position. Burn this image right here into right there, okay? That look is all the pros do it. There's just footage of people right in here. So the weight goes back, racket does not go back. So the way you fix this, if you've been diagnosed that your stage 2 is wrong, is go ahead and start making sure your feet are width apart so you have it. And then secondly, start here and then weight transfer and pause. Literally pause here with just your little bit of weight on the front foot and see if you're like this. Take a look, okay? And you might even have to start in this position. Okay, so that's a simple one, but those are the 2 things that usually go wrong at the second checkpoint, which is the weight transfer. People aren't transferring their weight, or they transfer the weight and the racket came back. Those are a couple fixes for that. Okay, we're at serve checkpoint number 3. And on this one, we're checking the ball toss release, like when it leaves my hand. Okay, so what's supposed to happen is that my arm is supposed to be 45 degrees, so it's kind of towards that post right there, and I'm supposed to release the ball roughly eye high. Okay, so if I were to release the ball way down here when my arm is still moving kind of forward, it would be obvious because I pushed the ball forward. Okay, the other extreme here is that I hold on to the ball too long, and instead of releasing at the eye, I keep holding on. I don't release till it's here. Now my hand's already headed back, and it might look like this. Okay, so if I release eye high, that's going to give me the best chances of getting the ball kind of up in the air, straight from where my hand released it. Okay, so there's a whole lot more, but let me just kind of tell you a couple things. So the thing I would do right here, if this has been told to you that you're not doing this right. The other thing I'd say is a possible mistake is this arm. We're going to call this a J-toss. Watch the motion of my arm. Instead of coming down and then kind of straight up towards that 45 angle, that post over there, it comes here, it goes all the way behind the baseline, and then I throw the ball kind of forward. So that's called the J-toss because it looks like the letter J here that I'm making. Now, here's my thought on the J-toss. I don't teach it. I don't recommend it. I'm sure that I could probably find a really famous tennis player that uses a bit of a J-toss, okay? But for most people, that's not necessary, and in my opinion, it just makes things worse because now the ball is moving, instead of straight up, it's kind of moving away from you, okay? So making sure the way you would do this, the best corrective technique is probably going to be this. Making sure my arm is here, and I'm literally aiming my arm to that target, which is that net post over there. And second part of this is just to release and then let it drop. If I release the ball eye high, it's probably going to be dropping a little bit in the blue and a little bit to the right. So that's kind of like my audit. I can see it. If I have that ball bounce anywhere else, let's say it bounced, watch this example, over there, chances are I had a J-toss, okay? So you can almost reverse engineer this. Wherever your toss goes, you can kind of imagine that's where you kind of threw it instead of just right here, straight down and straight up. So that's the ball toss release. That's what you're looking for. Some fixes is just go ahead and don't serve. Remember, just do the toss and do that. And literally let it go. Try to catch it. Okay, that's a good one. Throw it up, try to catch it. If you can't easily throw and catch it, this is probably the best corrective technique. Like if I had to take steps like, well, I got to do that to catch it, then you know you probably need some more practice at that. So the toss and release and the catch, that's a perfect corrective technique and something you can practice if your toss is not being released at the eye level. Okay, stage 4 is the loading stage. Sometimes I call that the trophy stage. And this is probably where most people fail, okay? This is a really tough one to understand. So the common mistakes in the trophy phase is instead of getting your body into this trophy position where you're kind of storing energy and the racket's up like this, the common mistake, the most common, is probably this. Instead of racket up, the racket gets into what we call the waiter tray. Because it looks like a waiter tray, like I have a bunch of glasses of water, like a waiter walks out to deliver, okay? We'll call that waiter tray, and this is how you can fix it. So whenever we're making technical changes, we do parts of the serve, we do parts of the grip. So right away, I would say to you, you're going to use a half grip. So still continental, but I'm going to choke way, way up on this one. Okay, so remember, we diagnose the problem as a waiter tray, which is also palm up, because that's how your palm would be in the waiter tray. So we have to break that habit, and this is super, super common one. So here's how I do it. I want you to think of, if I were to salute you, okay, the way I properly salute is I face the person, and I take my hand here, and if you look at the palm, my palm right there, it's down, it's face down when I salute properly. So really, the choked up grip, a good way to practice this is literally to start and imagine that you're in a salute position. So here's how it would look like. I come up here, I salute a couple of times, then from here, I'm not going to go restart. I'm going to start from here. I'm going to toss and hit. Okay? Well, remember, I'm not too worried about where the ball goes at this point. I want the salute. I want to make sure I'm saluting right here, and then there's a toss and a hit. Okay, that's a great way to start that process of breaking this habit. Okay, a couple other ones that might resonate with you even more so. If you look at this, it's kind of like if I was brushing my hair. I would brush it this way. So the racket from the top view goes from right to left, kind of goes behind me. So if it's easier for you to understand, still recommend a half grip, that you're going to brush your hair once, twice. So instead of a salute, you're going to brush once, twice, and then the third time you serve. Okay, that would be another nice progression. I think you should try, I'll give you another one yet. Try all three of these, see which one. So that one again is brush the hair a couple times, and then brush and serve. Okay, the last one is just another trick. Remember, the goal here is to go from palm up to get your body used to palm down. Okay, so I'm going to literally tap my head. I'm going to tap my head because the only way I can do that is with the strings down and my palm down. So I tap once, tap twice, and then I serve. Okay, watch that one again. Tap my head once, tap my head twice, and then I serve. So those three are my favorite and most useful ways to break the most common thing here, which is that waiter tray. Okay, so we're talking technical checkpoint number 4. It's called the trophy, it's called the loading phase, and this is the number one thing that we do. Let's talk about one other thing that can break down here. A lot of times in the review, you probably saw it earlier, I show like a bow, like a little bit of a bowing, and I even make a yellow line here, and we see if the person's hip is going out. That's more of an indicator. This itself, watch, just sticking my hip out is not correct. Okay, that's not a good coaching tip, like, hey, stick your hip out. The hip will go out if I do this part properly, where I rotate and get my weight down and onto the back foot. That hip will start to stick out. Okay, so if that's not what you're doing, then if that was specifically what was wrong with you, is that your body was too straight and there's no coiling, here's what I would want you to do. From this position, do this. From this position, do this. And feel that the weight is transferring. So what's happening here is I'm going back, I'm rotating back, and I'm dropping my leg here. In the beginning here, there should be most of the weight in the back foot. Okay, so just load up that back foot. Okay, load up that back foot. If you're really struggling with this, another way you can do this, if we're past the waiter tray now, we're onto the second thing that could be happening here, which is you're not loading properly. Then one thing you can do is unweight this foot by just with a toe or literally off the ground, and just put all your weight here, and from here toss and serve, and that'll give you the beginnings of the feeling of what it should look like. Okay, it's not just a sway. To do it properly, you're loading, unloading, and there's a lot of moving parts. So those are some ways you can fix that particular checkpoint. Okay, now we're looking at the racket drop or the launch. I call it the same thing. So it's after the trophy position, and I'm going to scoot up a little bit so you can just be straight on me. What's happening here is from the side, I should be able to see how far down my racket goes, and you should be able to see all the strings. If you're seeing this, that means I'm leading forward with the strings, and that's incorrect. What should be happening is I'm like this here, and I'm leading forward with the edge of the racket, okay, right up like that. Okay, so the best way, the problem here is that it's going to be hard for you to see, right? So you have to do a buddy check. You, a coach, a buddy, somebody has to tell you how far your racket's coming down. If your racket is only dropping to just around your neck or so, that could be that you have some shoulder flexibility restrictions. Okay, so I don't want you to hurt yourself, but be aware of that. Or it could be that you're just not used to this and you need to get that racket drop. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. The racket going down to maybe by my low back, and the fact that it's coming up on edge, which could be checked by you seeing the strings. All right, so let's say that we're doing that wrong. Okay, so the way you're going to fix that if you're doing that wrong, or you have a poor racket drop, number one is you need to be diagnosed. So you're not going to be able to just look behind you. You have to have someone tell you. And I would tell them, where is it? Is it shoulders? Is it dropping to my mid back, my low back? If it's not to mid or low back, then you should probably start doing some exercises to loosen up your shoulder and get more range in your shoulder. The other thing that you can do with a racket drop is, it's really kind of difficult, but I'll show it to you here. You take a device like this, or any piece of stick, and you take it and you drop it and you throw it. You're literally going to throw it, so I'm just going to do it over here, up against that tarp. So there's a fake throw, there's a fake throw, and here's the real throw. Okay, that's a rubberized thing, so it's not going to hurt anybody. But just getting that racket drop behind you. It's not quite like throwing, because when you throw and just your hand's involved, your hand doesn't really drop. okay? But we have this, 27-inch racket that does end up dropping. So that's a couple of checkpoints that you can see when it comes to doing the drop or the launch, which is super important. All right, guys, so for this checkpoint, number 6, which is the point of contact, I want to leave the court because we're going to use a teaching aid, this tarp, or it could be a back fence or something like that. But this is the best way. For sure, if you're broken here on this point of contact being nice and high, the number one mistake is that it's too low and there's a bent arm kind of stuff. But what happens is because the racket goes so fast, it's kind of a blur, you may not know, okay? That's why videotaping things is so helpful. So the tip that I have, the corrective technique works wonders, is you're gonna start with a half grip and a half motion. You're gonna come right about here, and you're gonna get real close to a tarp or a fence or whatever it is, and you're gonna toss it up, and you're gonna trap the ball, and you're gonna freeze for just a second or two right at your point of contact, okay? Now in this example, you can see my arm is straight, and I'm getting feedback. Now, if this was over there, you wouldn't get that because you would hit and then you go right through, so it's too quickly gone. All right, so now I can go down, after I do several of those, I can go down to more of a normal grip, lower if you will. Still half motion because I don't want to get this in the way. Half motion, toss and hit. Okay, from here, toss and hit. This, freezing it and pausing it, allows your eyes to kind of see, okay, yeah, my arm was fully extended or not. A lot of you, when you do this, are going to see things like this. Okay, you'll trap it, but you're trapping it too low. Let's try that one more time. So you come up here and you trap it right down here, and you're like, wow, that's only a little bit above my head. Ideally, I go up here. Another way you can do this before you start this is just without the ball, is just reach up nice and comfortably high with a full straight arm. And now you have a visual. I know that Jorge, being as tall as I am, should be hitting somewhere around there. Now I toss it, and you can see, yep, I'm pretty much somewhere right around there. So this tarp or a fence or something, don't do it against a hard wall because it'll just bounce. I will give you a little tip. A lot of people do this on their own and they can't do it and they report back, I couldn't do it, I couldn't trap it. Your toss has to be right up against that tarp. If it's a foot away, by the time you hit it, the ball's already kind of ricocheting off the tarp. So make sure that the toss itself is right up against the tarp, and it's okay for you to start with not the full motion, just to go here. But lastly, pause, take a look at your arm, okay? This is the greatest way to give yourself feedback on how to fix this one. It's a pretty common one that breaks down for people. Having a point of contact that's fully extended, that's how you fix it. Okay, serve checkpoint number 7. We call this one arm rotation. It could be called a lot of things. So arm rotation would happen right after the point of impact. It would hit the ball, and then what happens in those next couple of frames? A lot of people get this wrong. It's a common one when I work with students. So let me tell you what we're looking for. So the point of contact should be nice and high, and then afterwards what should be happening is that the racket comes down and you get into this position. The hitting side is now facing you. You can see my fingertips, not so much the back of my hand. Okay, so a lot of people when they get here and they hit that point of contact, and we do arm rotation, we have to fail them, and they go, well, what's the matter? Here's what usually happens. They go up to the point of contact, and then right from there is no arm rotation. There's more just like a drop. Okay, so that's not really how it should look either. So if you threw a tennis ball or any ball, what really happens, focus on my palm, okay? When I grab a ball, the palm is kind of facing that way. And as I throw it, the palm faces forward. And what you may not know is after the ball's gone, almost always the palm faces away, okay? You can see this YouTube videos, ton of them, pitchers throwing, people serving, any kind of throwing motion. And most people don't understand that what naturally happens is after they release the ball, this is how your arm wants to go. So there's two pieces, and let's assume that you're doing this wrong, and here's how I'm going to help you. The first thing that I don't want you to think about is your wrist snap, okay? That joint itself is not, as a matter of fact, I was taught to wrist snap. I mean, they use those two words, snap your wrist, wrist snap. And really, if you look at the best players, they're not really snapping and breaking their wrist on the serve, okay? There's two things going on, because there's two parts of my arm. The first part is from my elbow to my hand, okay? This rotating there, this is called pronation. This is called supination. Pronation, supination. The other part of my arm that's involved is not the front part, but the back part, from the elbow back to the shoulder. This is called external rotation. This is called internal rotation. External rotation, internal rotation. So if you really look at what happens, the forearm is doing pronation, and the back of the arm, bicep area, tricep, that's doing internal rotation. So if I do those things together, that's called long axis rotation. Fancy word for you to know. Now, here's the way I would have you measure this. Take a device like this. You could even use your racket, but this is a little bit easier. And just literally point it down. Just point it down. Another way, if you don't have something like this, is take your thumb and point it down. Like you're saying, boo, I don't like this thing. But point it way down. Get your elbow up high and point it down. Don't point it down like this, okay? So what we're seeing here with this elbow like this is called the inverted elbow, okay? You'll see it with most good servers, at least to some degree. So one fix is just to do this, right? Go here, do what I call a thumb serve. Okay, thumb goes up, thumb ends down. Thumb goes up, thumb ends down, okay? And you get that motion. This is another way to do it. And just another way with just your racket is get your racket and hang it in this position. Go thumb down and just hang it in this position loosely, okay? Now this is super important. I don't want you to go so far that you get to here and then you're forcing yourself out there. This should happen after the point of release. You're just letting go and it gets into this position. So just kind of burn this image into your head. That's the way to do it. Now, one other little way, just follow me over here. I'm going to go by a tarp because there's another technique that I think works pretty good. So let's go check it out. Okay, so let's use this tarp, this guide now, to help you some more. So we know that when we leave, it's going to go up. The racket should be going up on edge. And then, in other words, my palm is towards you, the camera. And then I'm going to pronate and do my arm motion, long axis, and my strings now point forward. And then I'm going to finish with the same side of the strings over here. So just this motion along a fence and making sure that at this point the camera is on my left side, you can see the back of my hand. If this camera was on my right side like before, you see my fingertips. Okay, so this is one way to do it that's really helpful, and get to that stage, get to this stage. Another way is just with your hand and get to this stage. So the ball's off the tarp, ball's off the tarp, the ball touches the tarp. Off, off, ball this way, palm forward, palm that way. Okay, so your body just needs to kind of learn these positions. So these are some tricks. But the key thing here, if you're not doing the arm rotation properly, is you might be focusing too much on this, or just on your wrist, or not including the shoulder at all. Done properly, long axis rotation, the forearm will pronate, this arm will internally rotate, and you end up in this kind of position, which I like to call the inverted elbow. So that's an easy one. Well, it's not so easy, but it's a great way to fix that very common problem. All right, let's talk about checkpoint number 8, which is the landing. Okay, so you've jumped up, you've hit the serve, and now you land. And we know that is technically correct. You're supposed to be landing inside the court. Okay, a lot of people, probably over half, will either land when they're done with their front foot. By the way, it's a left to left. Okay, so you land, you go off the left and you land on the left if I'm right-handed. And they'll either land on the line or behind the line. And in some cases, it might even land further back. Okay, so what we want is we want to make sure that we land out here in the court, at least most of the foot into the court. So here's how you do it. You don't want to serve, because if you do your whole serve, you're going to go into autopilot and your normal thing will happen. So one thing I want you to do is to do it without a ball. Okay, so you're going to do it with a racket, no ball, and you're going to do it, and you're going to just measure where it lands. Just take notice. Okay, so right in here without a ball, throw it out in front and go. The reason that not having a ball is important, as soon as you introduce a ball, now your body's like, oh, we're serving, and you're going to do your old thing. You're going to default to your autopilot. Okay, so one way is just to do it without a ball. The other way is to literally do it without a racket. So I call this the hug method. You're going to hug yourself, and you're going to go through a motion of your serve, but you're not going to have a ball or a racket. So watch. There I'm pretending I'm bouncing it. Here's my weight transfer. Here's my ball toss, and there's my serve. Okay, by doing that, it takes away all the other moving parts, and I'm just focusing on the bottom. Okay, so watch my left foot. There's my rituals, weight transfer, toss, jump. There's my serve, and that's one kind of corny way that's super helpful for learning that. Okay, another little last tip I'll give you that you can try is to stick the landing, I call this. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to use either the no racket method, just my arms, or just a racket, but definitely not a ball. Let's just use racket in my example and no ball. And you're going to serve, and when you land, you're going to try to hold that position with just the weight on that foot. So I come up here, I serve, I stick it, and I try to land it. See, I couldn't keep it for very long. So that little exercise is sticking the landing, and hopefully you're up in here, you can do this. If you do it perfectly, you'll be able to balance yourself. If you're normal, you're probably going to be tipping a lot and you won't be able to kind of maintain the balance. But those are some typical ways to worry. I am going to say this, with checkpoint 8 here, the landing, and the next one we're going to talk about, these are less concerning to me, because almost always, especially if it's a newer, younger player or someone who hasn't played that much, this will fix itself as you get older, bigger, stronger. The more violent you swing and the more stuff's going on, the more likely that will launch you forward. So if I see this with a younger player or a newer player and they're not doing it, I'm not crazy, but I do want you to know what the checkpoint is and how you can check it. Okay, checkpoint number 9, the final of the 9 serve checkpoints. We call it the counterbalance. And really what happens, the last one we talked about was the landing. If you landed and you had a lot of power and your chest gets forward, the more forward your chest goes, the more this back leg goes back. Okay, a really good serve almost always has some kind of counterbalance. It's almost an indicator. At the pro level, you can see, I'll put some examples up here. Here's Isner. You can see his right foot goes so far back, it's almost higher than his head. Now, obviously, he's a really tall, almost 7 foot tall person. So here's my thoughts on this. The way you can do this, if you don't have any counterbalance, again, remember what I said about the last checkpoint, number 8, and this one, number 9. I'm not totally freaked out when people don't do this just yet, because as they get stronger and more power and more violence in their serve, the more likely that they'll be landing with their chest more forward, and the more that happens, frankly, I don't have too many 12-year-olds that are bombing serve so hard that they're landing like this and they're counterbalancing. But here's how you can practice it. Get into this position and literally do that, and they come back to the toe. And then do this, they come back to the toe. And then do this, they come back to the toe. If you're not doing much of a counterbalance now, don't try, this is how you feel it, but don't try to add it, okay? Because if the last thing I want you to do is hitting serves, and then after the serve, you kind of put this extra step in there, it's going to be very awkward. It will come as you get older, bigger, stronger, and higher skill level. So if it's not happening right now, don't kill yourself, but I want you to know what that is and what it looks like. And you saw some examples there, what the pros look like as well.
All right, Jorge, thank you so much for that. Those videos I know are going to help so many people out there in the serve. It's just a hard puzzle for people to put together, and you did a beautiful job showing how, you know, wherever they're getting stuck, that there's a fix for it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do that.
No problem, buddy. I hope that was helpful. I'm sure some of you guys already know. If you don't know where you are on those, obviously you need to videotape yourself or have a friend videotape yourself, maybe a coach do it, so you can just stop at those 9 checkpoints now and say, how am I, you know, when I release and all these things. So you can do a bit of self-diagnosis. And the other thing is, this is technique, okay, but the goal is not to have all 9 checkpoints perfectly set. You can be a hell of a server and hold serve with most of them set, okay? Because there's 2 parts of this whole serve world. The first part is getting your technique correct or mostly correct, right? And then the second part is strategy, like where to serve, how to serve, why would I serve there, being smart about that. And I know that at my club it's super easy for people to just like, if they did 100 hours on their serve in a year, like 100 out of 100 is all technically based. They never work on targeting things or, hey, I'm serving to Peter, he's a lefty, he's got a 1E maybe up high, he's no good, so I'm going to try to serve it into that area. And that's where it becomes fun, right? So this is just the technical part, should be followed by the strategy part right afterwards.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you so much.
You
so guys, if you are enjoying Tennis Con 6 and you want to own it for life, and if you're on Jorge Capestany's email lists, if you're not on his email list, we'll give you a couple websites so you can go get on his email list. He'll be sending you an email, and he's got a really cool bonus if you decide to upgrade to lifetime, which you're going to want to do. Because remember, I did a thing where this guy, Ernest, I forget his name, but it's escaping me right now, but I did on the video. He did a study where people forget 95% of what they learned like 2 or 3 days later. But if you go through things 5 times, systematically throughout the year, you can retain 95% of what you learned. And so you want to upgrade the lifetime. And if you do so, Jorge, tell them what they can get if they click on your special link.
Yeah, so I'm going to offer 3 months of full access to my tennisdrills.tv website, which is mostly known by coaches. But on this website, whether you're a coach or a player, there's tons of stuff. There's over 2,000 tennis drills, probably more than 40 serve drills you can do. A lot of these you can do with your buddies. But I also have this thing called a lab where the entire courses, like what we cover here today, Peter, was part of a smaller piece of the larger course. And I have deep dive technique course on serving, returning, forehands, backhand is coming out next month, a whole strategy section. So when people see it, and maybe when we do our live thing, we can share that. It freaks them out. I mean, it's like the world's biggest tennis drills website. And if you're a coach, I have 80 courses, probably 30 of those courses, you can take a quiz, and it's already approved for USPTA or PTR credit. So obviously they think it's good enough to put out. So yeah, I'm excited. I think that was a good bonus last year and had a lot of people like it. And you can go in unlimited for up to 3 months, and you can watch as much as you want. There's a bunch of drill diagrams you can download. So yeah, that's going to be helpful.
And just to show you guys how powerful. So this guy, his name is Herman Ebbinghaus. Okay. And he talked about the forgetting curve. And just to show you, I filmed this video talking about him 2 or 3 days ago, and I forgot his name. So he's right. I couldn't even remember his name. So that goes to show why you guys should totally upgrade and take advantage of Jorge Capestany's deal, because you're going to learn so much cool stuff at TennisCon. But if you don't watch it at least 5 times, you're going to forget 95% of what you learned, just like I learned this. I forgot just now. I already got the forgetting curve. He's right on that forgetting curve, Jorge.
Forgetting curve works. That's right, man.
All right. Well, very cool. Thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate it so much.
Congrats to you again on pulling off all this work. I know it's an enormous amount of work to do all the behind-the-scene things, and I hope it goes great for everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care, guys. Enjoy this presentation. Watch the next one, and we'll see you on the next video.